Now let's finish up our render by tweaking some material settings and adding some lights. So right now I'm working on the outside of the eye. I've gone ahead and just as we discussed, I went through all of the different materials, added all those maps exactly like we did with the ones that we went through in the lesson. And so the one that I'm looking at now is the outer eye. And so this one, I don't have any maps. There are some maps that got output, but we don't really need those. All we need to do is we need to get the reflection and the opacity correct. And so I'm going to go ahead and just move up a little bit closer to the eye so we can kind of see what that looks like. And go ahead and select the eye out material. So the first thing that I want to change is the transparency of this. So I'm going to come down to transmission. Let's increase the transmission weight. Okay, so we'll take that pretty high. Now you can see we've got this clear reflective coating, and then we can see the inner eye inside. I'm also going to come up to the color and take this color from the diffuse way down. So we're not getting that contribution because it's more reflective and clear. We can come down to the roughness, and I think the roughness is probably pretty good at around 0.03. You can see how that becomes rougher as we take it up. So I'm going to say maybe 0.03 for the roughness, something like that. And then the IOR value, the index of refraction, this is actually a number that corresponds to real world materials. And so if you have a particular kind of object you're trying to create that is, a certain kind of metal or glass or whatever it is, you can actually look up the actual index of refraction that it should be and put that value in. So I'm going to go ahead, the different parts of the eyes have different IORs, but I'm going to go ahead and put in about 1.3 for the index of refraction. You can also just put a bit of metalness in there if you don't have any. And now let's say I want to add a little bit more brightness to this eye. So I'm going to come over to the eye inner and we'll go ahead and map it. And if you want to add a little bit more brightness to this, you can actually click on our eye inner and we want to come down to emission, give ourselves a little bit of emission, and then I want to pipe the eye color into that emission. So I'll take this out color and come down to emission color, pop it right in there. And then, you can see as you increase this, it's using that texture to brighten up that image. And so I'll do maybe 0.15 or so, something like that. And so once you've got the outer eye and inner eye done, let's go ahead and start to add some lights. So I'm going to move this off to the side. Let's go ahead and kind of pull out a little bit. And I want to add a few lights, and I'm just going to use some normal lights. So I'm going to bring in a directional light. I'll pull this off to the side. And with that directional light selected, I'm going to go ahead and bring it out, and I want to rotate it. I'm going to bring it in position just so I can see it a little bit better. The position actually doesn't really matter with your directional light, but I want to have this kind of rotated down. I'm going to rotate this down like this, and I want to come kind of straight down. And you can see here, if I take that intensity down to 0, you can see the difference. I'm going to actually set this intensity to 10. And let's rotate it a little bit. Okay, so I want it to be coming from kind of the top back. And let me take this down to a little bit lower. Let's go maybe 5. I also want to bring in a spotlight. So go ahead and create a spotlight. And on this one, I'm going to go ahead and under the panels, I'm going to choose look through selected. That'll let me place this light a little bit easier. I come around here, and we're going to get kind of a angle like that. Let's go back to our perspective, and you can create a camera as well for your render. But let me kind of frame up an angle here. So it looks like that. Let's check our intensity on the spotlight. I'm going to set this to maybe 1,000. And let me move the spotlight a little bit closer. And let's look at it from the side. I want to actually rotate it up a bit. All right. And then I want to increase the intensity quite a bit. So just to add a little bit of fill in there. Let's create one more directional light. And let's bring it up kind of next to the other one. Pull it back a little bit. Take it down, rotate it down a little bit. I'm going to go back on my spotlight. I'm just going to increase this a little bit more. Let's take that first directional light and I'm going to add a little bit of blue into it. This one I'll rotate a little bit more. So something like that. Let's go back into our render settings now. And I'm going to choose a 1K square. You can choose whatever output that you want. Okay, under Arnold Renderer tab, you have the sampling settings here. So these are things that you can tweak as you go. You also have this adaptive sampling, which will allow it to change the sampling based on its needs to get the right level of detail. And so let's go ahead and just with the basic settings here, I can go into the camera settings. I can see that the resolution mask has changed. So what I want to do is turn on overscan so that I can see that whole thing. I'll kind of frame up a composition here. And let's do a render now. So I'm just going to go to Arnold, render, and we'll let it render out. And this will be with the basic sampling settings. So you can see it kind of going through the process of that progressive rendering. I'm going to go ahead back in my render settings and enable adaptive sampling. I'm also going to kind of frame this up a little bit better. So maybe something like that. I'm also going to do one more thing. I would also go into the gold material and just set the IOR to something like 0.47 is more accurate for gold. And so I want to get a little bit of that medallion in there so we can just kind of frame things up. And your lighting could be a lot better. I'm just kind of quickly throwing some lighting in there to get a nice render. So let's go ahead and we'll go to Arnold, hit render, and then we will see that update. So you get to a point where the render stops and you're able to see what you've got so that you can go back in and tweak any lighting or materials. So that's going to bring us to the close of this course on creating textures in Substance Painter and then rendering them out inside of Maya and Arnold. So this is the culmination of 3 different courses. If you started at the very beginning with ZBrush, creating our concept sculpt, we went in and edited topology and created some new topology inside of Maya, created UVs, took those into Substance Painter and created some textures, and then brought everything back together in Maya so that we could do our render with Arnold. So if you've stuck with us this long, hope you've enjoyed going through this process, and I'm excited to see what you do with your own creature projects. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.